For this week, we're going to focus on the importance of human capital. And so we're really conceptualizing human capital in a broader sense. And this connection between Battaglio, the Nigros, and then also the Sutton book. Just a couple brief announcements. I really encourage everyone, if you haven't already done so, to take the asshole test on page 121. It'll be interesting to see if you feel comfortable talking about this during your discussions this week. Our final commentary option is this week as well. Again, 4 are required. If you do all 5, they take the top 4 highest grades. And then next week is our last week, and remaining is deliverable 3, which I'll talk a little bit again at the end of this brief lecture, but please keep in mind to use the appendix at the end of the syllabus as your checklist to successfully complete these assignments. So some key concepts. The human capital movement is one of the most recent movements within human resource management, looking at employees as assets. And so really placing that human value on the workforce within the public sector. A couple other key concepts is strategic human resource management. 12.1 has the framework, but looking at planning, processes, capacity, planning again, and accountability. There's a nice application if you're interested on page 356, questions 1 through 4. I think this would help you to not only tackle the commentary for this week, but also trying to link this concepts between strategic human resource management and the human capital movement. So if you have time, I'd suggest you to do that. And then lastly, the model employer and mission critical positions that Nigro and Nigro talk about. And so the question becomes, how can you do this when your organizations today are often driven by fear? So think of an agency that you've already studied or worked for, and what are some lessons that we can learn from them? Do they value human capital? Or do you think that the public sector has a hard time with human capital? And so one way to address some of these issues, again, is that 5-pronged approach or the basic tenets of SHRM, which is short for Strategic Human Resource Management. So with that said, I want to transition to Sutton's work. And so one other perspective brings us back to our first day of class. And so that interactions model, how do we define a leader, a manager? And then lastly, how do you define an asshole in the workplace? And so I want to focus on assholes in the workplace and then how this leads to what human resource management education will look like in 2025. So looking at Sutton's work, I suggest we did this the first week of class, but even creating 3 columns. So how do you find a leader? How do you define a manager? And how do you define an asshole? In writing that list or coming up with those key distinctions, would you write a different list of engagement for the public sector, or do you think there's more assholes in the private sector? Third question is, what Sutton story really resonated with you? And how does that link to that self-test or reflection? And then lastly, how does this whole idea of human capital, dealing with assholes, the distinction between leaders and managers, how does this all link back to the human resource challenges and opportunities? So we've been talking about, the reform movements within human resource management. And so how can we use these challenges as potential opportunities? With that said, that leads us into deliverable 3. And so Battaglio talks about how we have a duty to continuously improve our knowledge of research and practice if we truly believe in bringing relevant research to bear on shaping practice for the better, and I do, then education is a lifeblood for improved management. So even though we have these variety of challenges ranging for employment at will to dealing with difficult individuals within a workplace, that education is the key or one of the key factors in moving us forward in management practices. So deliverable 3, again, how are you going to offer solutions? So I talked about how you're going to pick maybe an image or a video, right? And so trying to capture one of those challenges that he writes about in chapter 14. And so picking that and then having to provide solutions. So concluding thoughts here. Again, another quote, in one very important sense, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Public personnel administration will continue to be an area within which social values and political interests vigorously compete, and the outcomes of these clashes, as they have in the past, will have important consequence for American society. So again, this gets you to think about how you want to frame deliverable 3 and your final opportunity to kind of bring together everything that we've been discussing this short semester. Thanks again, and I look forward to our final week next week.